Yo guys, what is up? Max on a Borderlands 4 video, and today we are taking on the task of ranking in a tier list every single Borderlands 4 legendary weapon. Now, there's like infinite amounts of purple weapons, so not including any of those in this tier list. We're just going to be talking about legendary weapons. I currently just today crossed over 500 hours in Borderlands 4. I've made a lot of builds. I've used all of the weapons on this list, so I feel like I'm relatively qualified to just be having a conversation about this, but this list is going to be my opinions, my impressions. Yours may differ. I wanted to make this just for fun, and also to like have as a resource for new players. I will be like linking this sheet, so if you're farming and you want like a quick reference to see if something is good or not to pay attention to, you can use this like tier list as it. But I'm also going to be talking about what roles you want on each of these weapons. This tier list is going to be ranking the weapons not based off of how they default roll when you find the most common variant, but how their like most powerful variant ranks up against each other. For example, certain weapons on this list, like the Burt's Bees, for example, in my opinion, are pretty terrible. But if you get Torg stickies on them, now all of a sudden you've got homing Torg stickies and the gun just completely transforms. So we're going to be talking about the best versions of these weapons. We're going to just kind of like spitball all of them out onto the tier list and their tiers. And then afterwards, we're probably going to like rearrange them slightly to try to get a cohesive order of like left to right, with left being the best, right being the worst in those specific tiers. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's probably going to be a long one. Hope you enjoy it. Let's do it. Quick note for our like tiers and what classifies something as like A and what classes something as D. S is going to be like best in slot weapon for multiple builds. It either excels in mobbing or bossing, and is used across multiple characters as one of their best weapons. A is going to be like best in slot weapons, but for like more specific builds, or they don't quite shine in both mobbing and bossing. They're more specific to one different category. B is these weapons are really good, but like maybe they're more niche. Like for example, like a super good Tedior that only use on like a Tedior build might be in like high B tier. Then we get into C tier. These weapons have a purpose for something, but there's better options. There's stronger things. They're not going to perform for you unless you're like really specifically built around that weapon in its entirety. And then D is going to be like just bad. I would never build around. I would never use. Just doesn't perform in like most scenarios. All right, so with that, let's get started. First, we got the Aces May. If you're looking for a good Aces May, it can roll with Jacobs. That's what I would personally would recommend. Even with a Jacobs roll, I would rank this thing in C. It hits hard, but there's just better options. It doesn't really stand out in any categories. Next, we got the Aegon's Dream. I'd put this in B tier. It's a solid AR. It does multi-elements, which is nice because you get fire and cryo. It can roll with Jacob's parts to make it ricochet. It hits decently hard, but it is a bit weaker DPS. I would never take it to bossing. Definitely more of a mobbing weapon. Anarchy is going to be our first A tier weapon. It is a strong, like single target option for mobbing. It is like held back by the fact that you need to like hold its 20 stacks in order for it to really do damage. But if you're committed enough to this weapon, you can do some serious damage with it, and you can get stickies on it so that it can do some really decent bossing damage. I personally use this to one-shot a lot of bosses at like my start of my playthrough on like a Nuclear Winter Harlow. Sticky stacking with a rad Anarchy plus Neutron Capture, really powerful. Asher's Rise, we're going to be putting in D tier. I don't see the point of this weapon. Its whole thing is that if you like crit an enemy, you get a status effect, but the status effect is like much less damage than like most other purples that you can get way higher base status effect, and you could use things to guarantee those status effects. Just don't think it's a very good weapon at all. The Atling Gun, we're going to be putting in C tier. We do have Ordnance on this list. Atling Gun is a solid Gatling gun archetype. It homes in on enemies. However, in terms of just DPS, there's a lot of better purple like Gatling gun options. So I don't really see the reason to use it besides the fact that it's a cool legendary, but just like it gets out DPS'd in multiple classes. Next, we got the Burt's Bees. Burt's Bees got a very large variety of roles. You can get tasers, Jacobs, elements, stickies. If you can get like a Jacobs elemental Torg sticky Burt's Bees, This thing actually fries. However, you need like those things that it, like, in my opinion, has to have stickies to even be half decent. But if you get a stickies roll, all of a sudden you've got a gun that just spews bullets. Great for bossing. It actually does decent mobbing. It is a little bit awkward because a lot of times its projectiles aren't hitting things. But as a bossing option, particularly against larger enemies, it can be really, really strong, and definitely one of the better sticky stacking weapons in the game. For the lumberjack, we're going to be putting it in C tier. It's a solid weapon. Don't really have much else to say about that. It's like whole thing with like ricocheting bullets. You can just get like Jacob's parts on other ARs and just have them hit harder and do more DPS. It's a weapon that you can use, but I don't see it being used over like many other options. For the bod, that is going to be our first S tier weapon. I made a whole video breakdown on this thing. It is currently, because it has 5 different parts, like SMG, sniper, shotgun, it gets 5x damage. However, it also works with basically every enhancement roll that you can get. You can get a shotgun, sniper, SMG damage enhancement, and the bod benefits from all of those. It is one of the easiest weapons in the game to make the strongest, and it can be used for mobbing. It can be used for bossing. If you can get a COV sniper roll, it's great on Bloodshot Vex. Infinite Crit Harlow loves this thing. Ranger Rafa loves this thing. It's just, if you're looking for a weapon to do a lot of damage, it's the best in slot in most scenarios, and I think it's easily most deserving of S tier. Next, we got the Bonnie and Clyde. I'm going to be putting this in B tier. Bonnie and Clyde is one of the cooler weapons in the game. It's got this cool gameplay loop of like shooting your gun, then swapping to the shotgun. Shotgun powers up the AR. AR powers up the shotgun. However, it's just lacking a bit in damage. I find the shotgun form pretty underwhelming. It's a very cool weapon on like Bleed Vex, but it's outclassed in DPS in a lot of different scenarios. Next, we get the Boom Slang. Now, I actually have grown quite fond of this gun over the past few days. I think it's probably top of B tier. Could very well argue it's A tier. The Boom Slang as a default sniper role, really not good. However, if you get a Daedalus roll and like shotgun Daedalus, then all of a sudden you've got a like Torg sticky shotgun that bounces around. It's actually quite nice. You can be used for bossing and mobbing. However, there are just, once again, better options, and even like purple snipers that can do like basically what the Boom Slang is doing. So really cool option if you get it with a Daedalus shotgun part. Otherwise, wouldn't really rate it very highly. Next, we get the Borstel Ballista. Now, I think the Borstel is an easy A tier. It's personally my favorite Jacob sniper rifle in the game. Feels great to use. It's got a little bit of a downside in that its bullets have a like low projectile velocity, and its special ability where it shoots out all these extra projectiles, you need to be decently far away from enemies for. However, it just hits like a truck. Feels good to use. It's good on multiple different like high crit damage builds. Ranger Rafa likes the Borstel Ballista a lot. Sniper Vex obviously is one of her best in slot weapons. If you're farming for a Borstel Ballista, you're looking for a high crit roll. You need to inspect it. I believe it goes over 100% on the crit damage, so be checking that when you're looking for a good roll. Bottled Lightning, I also think, is A tier. It's one of the best AoE mobbing ordinances in the game, and it can also do bossing. It does get outclassed for bossing DPS from other purple launchers, which is why it's not quite S. It's not the best in like most situations. However, it's a really good ordinance for bossing and mobbing. Personally, I look for a 3-mag Bottled Lightning, so you never have to worry about running out of ammo on it. 2 is good. It'll roll more DPS. But personally, just for ease of mind, I would recommend looking for a 3 in the mag Bottled Lightning. Next, we got the Deity Pistol. This pistol has like a cool mechanic that you'd think would be really fun with the like Atlas tracking orbs. However, like the whole goal of this pistol, I think, is to have it auto put Atlas tracking orbs on enemies for you, so you can just shoot wherever you're going and just constantly shooting. But the like Atlas tracker orbs only really mark enemies if you reload it into them, so it kind of ruins the whole point of that like kind of like AFK shooting Atlas playstyle. And then even when you are doing that, it just doesn't do much damage. This weapon could be really cool, but I just don't think it does very well. Next, we got the Bugbear. This is a solid splash AR. I think it's lacking in damage. However, on like a cool splash damage build, it's a solid option. I just think that there's better. We're also going to be putting the Bully in C tier. Once again, kind of a cool pistol that you charge up, shoots does decent damage. It just needs more DPS. I think a lot of these weapons are going to get buffed pretty heavily. Next, we get the Chuck. Chuck's a very cool weapon. You really want Homing Replicator as your role on this, in my opinion. And I'm going to be putting it at the top of B tier. The Chuck is a really good TDR, and it's a really good TDR if you're doing a TDR build. However, that's a very, very specific niche build. And even if you are doing a TDR build, it's not even like the best in slot. I've have like purple TDRs on me that hit higher damage and do more DPS than the Chuck. The Chuck is great because you can throw it so quickly. So your like DPS of throwing it quickly is nice. But in terms of just like big TDR chunky hits and melting bosses, I don't even think it's like the best in slot option. It's definitely a very good one. So that's why we're going to be putting it in B tier. Next, we get the Cold Shoulder. I think this is just kind of like more of a meme weapon. I'm going to be putting it in D tier. Not too much else to say about it. Then we get the Complex Root. Complex Root, in my opinion, is S tier. It is one of the highest like boss damage weapons in the game. If you get it with a specific role, you can use it on a bunch of different builds. Bloodshot Vex, Infinite Crit Harlow, Ranger Rafa likes this thing. You really want to find a, if you can, a Jacob's roll on the Complex Root. The Complex Root shoots this big beam, and then that big beam can multiply if you get it with Jacob's. And if you get it with an Atlas Tracker Dart, all of those beams will hone in on the same enemy. It just leads to some ridiculous burst damage. It's a little awkward for mobbing. It can be used for mobbing, but it is genuinely one of the best bossing options in the game. So definitely an S tier in my mind. Next up, we get the Convergence. I think the Convergence is also S tier. If you can get the Convergence with a Jacob's roll, it becomes a mobbing monster. The big perk of this weapon is you shoot once and it flings out like 20 projectiles. All of those projectiles and tons of different builds can proc tons of different effects. You can refund your ammo easily with it on certain builds. It does tons of bossing damage, especially on larger targets. And you just, it's an all-around monster. There's not a situation where I wouldn't be confident in bringing the Convergence with me, to be honest. There are certain builds that are significantly better with it, such as, like, for example, Nuclear Winter Harlow, where you're using neutron capture and proccing that as many times is super beneficial to you. But even on, like, non-flat damage builds, the Convergence is just a really, really great option. And so I put it in S tier. Next, we get the Dark Beast. I'm going to put the Dark Beast in D tier. I've wanted to like this thing, and I've tried to like it on numerous occasions. I just don't think it feels good. It's such a cool name for a weapon that, like, you know, I think maybe this thing with some love and some changes could be really cool. But right now, it just doesn't do much damage. It's not very versatile, and I wouldn't really use it in any situation. Next, we get the Disc Jockey. I'm going to put the Disc Jockey also up in A tier. Now, the Disc Jockey could very well be argued to be S tier because it is one of the best mobbing ordinances. However, in my opinion, it gets outclassed by a lot of different purples for bossing. Part of the reason I want to put all these ordinances that are legendary in the A tier is, one, because I think they deserve A tier, but also I think a lot of the legendary ordinances just need buffs. There are so many purples that I would take over any of the legendaries for boss damage. So while the Disc Jockey serves a role that's really cool in its mobbing, I still think it like needs a bit of love. Same with the Bottle Lightning. And so for that reason, I'm putting it in A. Next, we get to the Divided Focus. I'm going to be putting the Divided Focus in C tier. It's a cool weapon. It bounces around on certain builds that are really gun enabling, like Ranger Rafa. This can be a fun option. Sorry, my camera's blocking. However, once again, there's just so many better things to use and higher damage options. Next, we get to the Affinity XXL. No, I think this is probably an A tier sniper rifle. I love this thing on Bloodshot Vex because it shoots so fast. You can use COV with it to get guaranteed crits, proc tons of bloodshot. But even not on Bloodshot Vex, this is one of the higher DPS weapons in the game. It blares out ammo. It does a ton of damage. You can use it for bossing and mobbing. And even if you're not playing a Sniper Vex build, it's a really, really strong option across multiple characters. Next, we got the First Impressions. Now, I'm not going to be ranking pre-order weapons, so I'm just going to put those in the, like, can't rank. I don't think the First Impressions is very good. I'd probably put it in C tier regardless. But yeah, that's where I'd put it. Next, we get the Fisheye Sniper Rifle. The Fisheye is solid. It's a fun weapon to use. And, like, its mechanic of this, like, big charge-up railgun is cool. I just don't think it hits all that hard in comparison to other things. And I would, like, rather use the Borstel, Affinity, the Boom Slang all above it. So personally, I'm going to be putting it in C tier. You could probably put it in higher. Like damage-wise, it probably deserves to be in B tier, but it just feels awkward, and I don't like using it very much. So personally, I'm going to put it in C tier. Damage-wise, you could probably argue it goes in B, though. Then we get the Forsaken Chaos. This is a Twitch drop weapon. It's pretty good, honestly. It's actually one of the more solid T tier weapons that you could use. Basically, if you haven't seen this thing, when you reload it, you throw it, and then it goes and seeks enemies and shoots at them. The shots that it shoots does a lot of damage, so it's a pretty solid T tier. I don't think it's quite as good as the Chuck, but actually pretty strong weapon. Frangible, you already know this thing's D tier. If there was an F tier, the Frangible would be in it. Pretty terrible SMG. Gamma Void, also D tier. It's an ordnance with utility that I think just needs more utility, or to actually be good on its own. Wouldn't rank it very highly. The GMR is one, by the way, currently I'm ranking all of these live on Twitch, and we did a Twitch poll because we were all very torn on if the GMR should go A or S. Eventually, we've kind of decided that the GMR should be at the top of A. It's a fantastic AR. It hits really, really hard, and it's a solid mobbing option. It can do some bossing damage on particular builds, but this is one of the higher DPS weapons. It is unfortunately a little awkward to use with its slow fire rate, so you do want a build that has a bunch of fire rate to make it feel good, but it's a very, very cool weapon. I just don't think it has quite the craziest mobbing or quite the craziest bossing to be justified into S tier, but it's definitely one of the best guns in the game. Next, we get the Goalkeeper. I'm going to be putting the Goalkeeper also in A tier. If the GMR is the top of A, I would put the Goalkeeper more towards the bottom of A. Very high DPS AR. Once again, to me, feels a bit awkward to use. You can kind of tap fire it instead of having to charge it up. Its shield that it shows is really cool, and it gets a bunch of extra damage. Definitely a high damage weapon, but I don't think it excels in any one particular scenario. Next, we get the Golden God. Now, I get DMs about the Golden God every day about how I got to use it on Rafa, and it just shreds bosses on Rafa. And personally, I just haven't really seen it. Yes, the Golden God does do more damage the more ammo it consumes, and you can get it to not consume ammo, and then it can do good bossing damage, absolutely. But this thing is absolutely terrible on any other setup. If you're using this on anything that isn't giving you basically infinite ammo, all of your ammo gets depleted instantly. You'll go through 180 rounds of shotgun ammo in 4 seconds, and it's completely useless. So on certain builds, yes, it can do good damage, but I still don't think it's the best damage option on infinity ammo builds. However, as a boss nuker, it is definitely a strong option, and that's why I'm going to be putting it in A tier. Next, we got the Gore Master. I'm going to be putting this in C tier. Just underwhelming shotgun, in my opinion, with an underwhelming effect. Wouldn't really use it in most scenarios, but it does do decent damage, so I don't think it's quite D tier. Speaking of guns that do decent damage, but wouldn't really put it any higher, the Hellfire. Hellfire, I don't know what happened with the Hellfire in the Borderlands games. It was my favorite legendary in the old Borderlands games, and now it just feels like it's just lacking a bit of a purpose. It's not even the best status effect option for status effect builds. This Hellfire can roll Maliwan, so you can get multiple different parts on it, which is cool. So you get a corrosive Hellfire or a shock Hellfire, which is cool. I just don't think it excels at any one thing, and so that's why we're going to be putting it in C tier. Speaking of C tier guns, we've got the Hellwalker. Hellwalker, I'm going to say it was better when it was kinetic before they turned it into a fire gun. Now it is not as useful. To be honest, it is definitely a buff if you're using it against flesh enemies, but most of the enemies in the game that I think that you're coming across are armor bars, and so Hellwalker is a big fall from grace, in my opinion, from previous Borderlands games. Next, we get the Hot Slugger. This is one of my new favorite Jacobs guns. I could see the Hot Slugger being a gun that is in future Borderlands games as well. That's how much I love this thing. It feels awesome to use across a ton of different builds. If you're playing Bleed Vex or just a high bursty Rafa, Ricochet Rafa, if you're playing Amon and using all of his one-shot buffs Dragon's Fire, Dragon's Breath, and the like massive bonus shock damage after every reload. There's just so many builds that this is like best in slot. It is one of the highest damage weapons in the game, and while I don't take it to specific bosses, it can kill bosses, and it just hits like a truck. Genuinely one of the most fun guns to use in the game, and it packs a punch. Definitely an S tier in my opinion. Next, we get the Husky Friend. I want to put this in C tier. It's got some utility with its turret. It's a decent Tedior, but just better options once again. Then we get to the Kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope's D tier. I don't know why this gun exists. It is terrible. Then we get to the Chaosin. Chaosin, in my opinion, is S tier. It is one of the better sticky stacking guns in the game. Sticky stacking is like a way to one-shot a lot of the bosses in the game, or like one clip a lot of the bosses in the game. The Chaosin comes in a variety of elements. You're looking for a low mag size, 4% Torgue sticky elemental Chaosin, in my opinion. If you get one of these things on a build that can utilize like firing for a while, you will just one-shot all of the bosses in the game. And it's very high damage for mobbing. Torgue stickies in general feel a little bit awkward for mobbing, but if you're needing to kill something that is tanky while you're mobbing, it's a great option to pull out. Then we get the Katagawa's Revenge. Wow, a bunch of bangers in a row. Katagawa's Revenge is definitely S tier in my opinion. Once again, we're gonna like do the like left to right order at the end of the video, but Katagawa's Revenge, super good sniper rifle on so many builds. This is, in my opinion, one of Harlow's favorite weapons. It just works so well on so many of her builds. Currently, if you can get a Katagawa's Revenge with a Jacob's roll and then use the Jacob's enhancement to make it fire additional ricochets, plus use 3 out of 3 high caliber, you just hit everything on your screen. It's one of the best mobbing weapons in the game, and because of the amount of things that it summons, it can do ridiculous bossing. There's so many builds that like it, even on like a electrical fire, burn, shock, aim on build. It's a really cool option. Lots of builds use this thing. Definitely S. Then we get the Kickballer. Now, this might be a little bit of a controversial take, but I don't think the Kickballer is an S tier weapon, to be honest with you. Yes, if you get a Jacob's roll on it, you can make it one-shot bosses, but there's a lot of things in this game that one-shot bosses that don't one-shot you, and so for that reason, I don't think it's S tier. Yes, you can put this on Vex minions and get your Vex minions to use it, but just in general, I just don't rate this thing all that highly. I wouldn't really use it for mobbing. It's good for bossing, but it's only good for bossing if you don't have anything else going on for your build. There's just other things that will kill bosses faster and without killing yourself. Its damage is undeniable, but I wouldn't put it any higher than A tier. Then we get the King's Gambit. King's Gambit is very, very good on like a Ricochet or AFK Rafa, because you can make your Peacebreaker cannons like Ricochet and get massive multipliers. Can use it to delete bosses. It's also just a decent weapon. Wouldn't put it any higher than C. Super niche weapon, but good in its role. Then we get the Lead Balloon. Lead Balloon, I'd put in D tier. Just a bad shotgun. Linebacker, I'm putting in A tier. This is one of the best splash shotguns in the game. You can just carpet bomb an entire area with it. It does good damage. You do need to shoot at enemies' feet, but it hits so many times and hits so hard that it's a really good mobbing option and a good bossing option. You just need to be a little bit careful of like killing yourself with it. Then we got the Lucian's Flank. Lucian's Flank, in my opinion, is B tier. It's a solid mobbing weapon. It by default rolls with Jacobs, so it ricochets ammo. It does seem to have a bit of a cooldown on its like internal mechanic of refunding ammo every crit, because even if you're critting every shot, you're shooting a ton, it won't like have infinite ammo. This thing is a solid mobbing option because it hits so many times, but it's just lacking a bit in the like damage department. If you're shooting this thing against like even a badass mob, it can run out of damage pretty quickly. Then we get our Lucky Clover. Lucky Clover actually like does decent damage. Definitely needs more buffs. This thing's mechanic is it like shoots out little missiles while you're firing it. Unfortunately, just don't see a reason to use it, but it does do decent damage. This is going to be probably one of the more controversial picks of the list. I just don't love this weapon. I know a lot of people rate the Ludi Mad Lad very highly. I just think there's a lot of other options that do what Ludi Mad Lad does better. It does fire very quickly, but it doesn't do much damage, even on its shotgun attachment. I just don't love this weapon. I think it's decent, and that's why I'm going to be putting it in B tier. Matador's Match, level 1 weapon, can't really rate. Then we get the Midnight Defiance. The Midnight Defiance is absolutely one of the best weapons in the game. If you get a Jacob's roll on this thing, it is genuinely one of the strongest things you can use. It will delete bosses, it will delete mobs, and I think it is probably the strongest mobbing weapon in the game on setups like Infinite Crit Harlow or Ranger Rafa. It's just silly. Like, the gameplay of it looks like you are hacking, basically, if you're using it correctly. Next, we get the Noisy Cricket. Not a great weapon, but it has a purpose, and its purpose is killing like vile enemies, breaking vile crystals, and it's quite good at that. So I'm going to be putting it in C tier. Wouldn't put it any higher, but for the purpose that it has, it's pretty good at. And, most of the weapons in D tier don't have any purpose, so that's why we're putting it in C. Next, we get the Oh My God. This weapon pisses me off, man, because it's so cool, and I want to build a build around it. And it's got this mechanic where you drain your shield while you're shooting it, but if you have overshield, you get infinite ammo. It'd be a really sick option on like Infinite Crit Harlow, where you infinitely crit and have infinite overshield, and you fire it really fast, so a gun with infinite ammo would be perfect. However, this gun has the worst damage, like one-shot yourself range that I've seen in a Borderlands game. I just constantly one-tap myself with it. On enemies that aren't even close to me. But the thing that's so frustrating with this thing is it's got such a short range because it's a laser weapon, so you have to get close to enemies, and if that enemy closes the gap by like 2 feet, you're instantly dead, even if you have overshield on. So really cool weapon. If you can manage your distance well with it, it does good work. However, it has a massive downside in that it does self-splash in a very, very close distance to you. Or far distance to you. So for that reason, I can't rate it any higher than B. Next, we get the Onslaught. Just think that this is a bad SMG. I would take a Burt's Bees over it basically any day of the week. Also, I don't know if it's true or not, but I feel like this thing bugs out to not do damage all the time. Anytime I've tested it, I've always like had it just not doing any damage. I don't know if that's because the gun's bad or there's a bug with it, but yeah, it just doesn't feel like it works half the time. Next, we get to the Oscar Mike. Now, this is a very, very tough one to rate, because its laser beam that it gets as an underbarrel is S tier. And you can one-shot bosses with it if you use an amp roll and you get a laser that does like 20,000 damage or higher per tick with like an amp rep kit or anything that will buff up your next shot, because the entire laser is considered one gunshot. It one-shots most bosses in the game. However, it's really just the laser, like the actual gun. I would personally not really ever use. It does decent damage. So, like, depending on what you're looking for in a gun, I kind of think that our S tier right now is doing both mobbing and bossing really well and can be very versatile in both setups. And so I think the Oscar Mike, you could put at the very, very top of A tier. But, like, if it's S, that's very debatable. Next, we get the Phantom Flame. Honestly, this is one of my favorite legendaries in Borderlands 4. It's a ton of fun to use. It is a bit lacking in the damage department. If you are playing Ranger Rafa, this weapon is a total blast to use. However, damage just needs a bit of a buff, and then I think it'll be a great weapon. Then we get the Plasma Coil. I would put the Plasma Coil in B tier. Plasma Coil can roll some crazy DPS numbers, but the one that I use is like 9.8k DPS. However, the lack of part variety on this thing really hurts it. Like, if you could roll Plasma Coil with like Jacobs or Stickies or like any of these things, it could be freaking sick. However, it's really slow. Projectile velocity absolutely hurts it, and its lack of part variety really hurts it. So I'm going to be putting it in B. Then we get the Potato Thrower. Potato Thrower is actually solid. I think it's a C tier weapon. On certain builds, it can be quite fun. I don't think it deserves D. Prince Harming absolutely does deserve D. I don't understand why that weapon exists. Queen's Rest is up next. This is a pistol that has a very, very wide roll range on the Queen's Rest. If you can get Jacobs, Elemental, plus Torg Stickies, it's a very, very solid option. It can do good bossing. It can do all right mobbing. There's a lot of better options. but it's one of the stronger pistols in the game. You'll notice that one thing that is common is we just don't really have many great pistols in Borderlands 4. I really think that category in general needs a buff. All right, next hot take. Maybe this isn't a hot take. We'll say. I am going to be putting... Oh, where to go? The Rainbow Vomit in A tier. I think this thing is... Well, when I first got the Rainbow Vomit, I thought it was one of the best legendaries in the game, easily. It is a kinetic weapon that does elemental damage. It can proc a ton of status effects. Those status effects don't do very much damage. Like, it's not really even that great of a weapon for a status effect build. And its projectile velocity really hurts it. It makes it very awkward to use. It's a low mag size gun. However, it is undeniable that when you are hitting your shots on enemies, it's really great at killing enemies. It's great at mobbing. It can do really good damage. However, its slow projectile speed, its low mag, makes this thing pretty awkward to use. And I've found myself moving away from it the more and more time that I've gotten into the game. It was one of my most used legendaries at the start, but I've kind of just found better options. Definitely think it's absolutely deserving of the top of A tier, but I don't think it's quite S. Next, we get the rangefinder. It's a solid pistol that does solid damage. Not too much else to say about that. It was a good leveling weapon, but I would never really put it on in UVH. I'll be putting it in C tier. Next, we get the Ravenfire. This is a solid ordnance. It's good against big targets. If you're fighting like a vault boss, it is a great option to try to take them down with. However, I just think it gets outclassed by a lot of purple ordnance. I also don't think it's as good as our like A tier ordnance. So we're going to put it into B tier. The Roach, we're going to be putting in, you could argue it's C tier or put it in D tier. If you're playing a build that is reaching like 95% crit chance, like Ranger Rafa, you can get all the little roaches to crit enemies, and then they do all right damage. Otherwise, they don't really scale, and it's pretty terrible in most characters' hands. There are some niche case scenarios where you can make the Roach do decent damage, but I think D tier is fine for it. Next, we get the Rowan's Charge. Now, the Rowan's Call is my, like, favorite weapon in all of Borderlands 3. I fucking love that thing. They did the Rowans so dirty in this game. I don't think it's any lower than B tier. It can, like, sticky stack, and it can do, like, all right mobbing. However, it just feels so much worse to use than the Borderlands 3 Rowan's Call. So I don't know what happened there. I'm going to be putting it in B tier. Next, we get the Ruby's Grasp. This is a very solid TDR. I don't think it's quite as good as the Chuck. So I'd put the Chuck above it, but I would say it's probably my next best follow-up for legendary TDRs. It fires the homing missiles. They do pretty good damage, not quite as good as the Chuck, but it's a solid weapon. It's also a very solid get out of fight for your life weapon if you're looking for one. I've had multiple scenarios where I just keep this thing on me, and if I go down, you can throw it up into the air, and the missiles will go and home and kill an enemy, even if you can't see that enemy. So if you're tired of dying and fight for your life from enemies going to hide behind cover as soon as they kill you, grab a Ruby's Grasp, put it on. You'll thank me later. It is very nice for that scenario. Otherwise, I wouldn't really use it. Next, we got the Songbird Pistol. I'm going to be putting the Songbird Pistol into Can't Be Ranked. Currently, at the time of recording this, this weapon, if you reload it and swap like a few times, it just does millions of damage. But that is like a very, very unintended interaction and bug. You need absolutely no build to one-shot every enemy in the game with this thing. So I like personally classify this thing differently than, like, for example, the Bod, which is doing a lot of damage and is benefiting from a lot of things, but that's like how the weapon is built. Like, it's supposed to do those things. It's supposed to be able to benefit from all of your enhancements and like all of your gun damage increases. The Songbird, I just don't think is supposed to be able to do like a billion damage a shot. Yeah, I just don't think I can rank that yet. If I could rank this thing, like using it as how it should be intended, I think it'd probably be like high B, if not low A. But right now, yeah, just hard to rank. Next, we get the 7 Cents. This is my favorite pistol in Borderlands 4. I still think it is needing buffs. I think pistols in general need buffs. I'd put it at the very, very bottom of A tier. Personally, really, really fun pistol, really good feeling pistol, but definitely like lacking in comparison to some of its other like A and S tier counterparts. The Sideshow, hate this thing, total meme weapon. The Sidewinder, pre-order bonus, not ranking it. The Sprezzatura, I think this thing sucks. It looks like it does a ton of damage, but I can hardly ever get it to hit things. Maybe just a skill issue. Just not a fan. Star Helix, my first prismatic. Absolutely love the Star Helix in previous games. I'd probably put it in D tier. I guess you could argue C. Next, we get the Stopgap on Bloodletter Vex. This is a very, very cool weapon. You can get it to do like 750% gun damage. However, it's quite awkward to use. I personally don't enjoy it all that much. However, it's undeniable that you can hit some really big, funny damage numbers with the Stopgap. Personally, I'd put it like below the Boomslang. Very, very solid sniper option, but I do think there's better. Next, we've got the Stray. Now, if you are not fortunate enough to have a Midnight Defiance with a Jacob's roll, I think the Stray is a decent option to replace it with. The Stray is one of the better mobbing weapons in the game. Granted, you have enough crit chance. You need to get the Stray in a Jacob's roll, and it rolls multiple elements. For like kinetic Vex, you're going to want a kinetic one. For other characters, you could go for an elemental one. Kinetic in general is just really strong in this game because it doesn't face many damage penalties to not matching elements, but genuinely one of the best mobbing weapons in the game across multiple builds, and it can shred bosses on the right setup. Definitely think it's deserving of S tier. Which, by the way, is kind of crazy. There's so many snipers in S tier. Snipers have seen some like huge blow-ups in this game. Next, we got the Streamer Ordnance. I would put this in B tier. I'd put it above the Ravenfire. The Streamer hits really hard. It hits really often, but you need things to be basically standing still for it to be good. If anything moves out of its damage, all of a sudden, all of your damage goes to 0. However, against bosses that stand still, it definitely melts them. Just think that there's better options. Next, we got the Sweet Embrace. I really like this thing. It is, potential to be replaced by a good purple Malawan shotgun. However, it default rolls in Jacobs. It has good dot damage. It has good impact damage. And it's one of my favorite weapons to use on dot builds because of its ricochets, because you can pair the ricochets spreading dots with the high status effect chance and the high dot damage. Just a good all-around option. Definitely don't think it's deserving of S tier, but you can get a really good roll of a Sweet Embrace, and it's just an awesome weapon to use. Next, we get the Symmetry. Cool idea of a weapon, a little bit awkward to use. I'd put it in B tier. Just not a big fan of Order sniper rifles, to be honest. The Tinged Inkling, I'm going to be putting in can't rank just for the fact that I really haven't used it much. I have 2. I didn't love them on my Ordnance playthrough testing that I did, but it's been a little bit of time since I last messed around with it, so I'm going to put that in can't rank. Next, we get the TK's Wave. TK's Wave, you could honestly argue is an S tier weapon. I'm going to be putting it at the pretty top of A tier. It's a high damage weapon. If you can roll an Atlas tracker on this thing, all of a sudden, all of these crazy projectiles doing these crazy patterns are all just honing in on a set enemy, and it becomes a really solid bossing option. But it's also great for mobbing if you're barrel stuffing enemies. If you're not spec'd for this thing, it can be quite awkward, and when you miss a shot with its low fire rate, it just feels terrible. However, if you're spec'd for it, and if you've got the specific parts, mainly an Atlas tracker, gun is fantastic all around. And next, we got the Truck Sniper Rifle. This thing just hits hard. It's just a hard-hitting Jacob sniper rifle. Doesn't really do all that much else besides just hit hard. I think you can get, personally, probably better purple sniper rifles than the Truck, and I prefer the Borstel Ballista over it, but it does hit like a Truck. Solid sniper if you're looking for, a classic Jacobs feel. The Vamoose, I don't really get this thing. I think it's D tier. Every time I've tried it, I've kind of hated it. Next, we get to the Whiskey Foxtrot. This is a weapon that I didn't put in my top 5 ARs, and I got a bunch of comments saying, hey, you're crazy. You got to try the Whiskey Foxtrot. And I had, but I hadn't tried, the roll. I've now tried the roll, which I believe is Ripper plus Jacobs on a high base damage. And I can confirm that this thing does shred. Definitely think it's in A tier. Don't think I'd put it at, the top of A tier, but it is a very, very solid AR. Does a ton of damage. Feels good to use. Next, we get to talk about the Wombo Combo. I think this is a top tier assault rifle. I personally would put it just slightly above the GMR. If the GMR and the Oscar Mike are both A tier, I'd put the Wombo Combo just slightly above them. I do think it's a bottom of S tier. It's just a high damage weapon. It fries mobs. It fries vile enemies. I think it's the best vile enemy killing weapon in the game because it just does so much splash damage. It shoots relatively quickly. You can get it with a massive mag. You can get it in a bunch of different elements. Just a really, really powerful feeling weapon. And one that I'd recommend most players in the game having in their inventory or in their backpack if they ever need to kill vile enemies. Definitely S tier in my opinion. And lastly, we have the Zipper. That's D tier. Don't need to say more. A bad gun. Guys, that's going to do it for our tier list. I hope you enjoyed. This was just kind of like a for fun activity. I think weapon balance is going to massively change in the coming months. If it's anything like Borderlands 3, this list will be completely different in the future. I plan to use this as a resource where I can put like plus green arrows and red arrows on all the weapons. And as balance changes, I'll be keeping this list up to date so you can use it as a resource for what to know, to what to look out for, what weapons are the best, what to throw away, what to keep. And I cannot wait to see how this shifts in a few months. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Hope you found it informative. I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.